Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Entertainment Headquarters, and welcome to Kaiju Connections. Now, this is a very special Kaiju Connections for me because can anybody remember way back in the day you used to have event cinema? Before media, before you had the internet, before any of that, you would see the odd advert on television and you would be hyped. You would wait a year or whatever to go to the cinema, see this film, and then you would wait a year or two till it was released on video or whatever. It's very rare in this day and age that we get that kind of feel and that kind of nostalgia, that kind of excitement over a film. Before this particular film, the last time I had those feelings was for uh, Infinity War and Endgame by Marvel. Since then, nothing really has appealed to me until now, and that is because there's nothing really that's really piqued me excitement. But I am a long-term kaiju fan, a fan of the giant monster genre ever since I was a young child. And being from the UK, England, the northeast of England, we don't really get a lot of the, the films released here or in cinemas. We might get them on DVD or Blu-ray here and there, but pretty much since the early 1990s, mid 1990s, we've had no real kaiju action here in the UK. Along comes Legendary's Monsterverse, which has kind of changed the course of that for all of us fans of the kaiju genre. It has put a massive microscope over it, which has gotten bigger and bigger, and now there seems to be a new fond interest. And I think superhero movie fatigue is set in, and people are looking for an alternative. And I do now believe, hopefully, the kaiju genre is that alternative. And speaking of kaiju, the movie we're about to talk to has taken the world by storm. Godzilla Minus One. Now, Godzilla is from Japan. He is the monster that started the genre, the kaiju genre. He really, really is. He is like the one you go to. Everyone knows who he is. People will know him now more than ever thanks to the legendary Monsterverse. But To's original Godzilla has had so many different carnations, so many different versions that you get a plethora of different elements within this character. He is a character with so many different elements to him that he is so unique. And this film, Godzilla Minus One, has been hyped to the hilt by the Godzilla community, by the kaiju community. And being a Godzilla fan and being from the Godzilla community, I never wanted to allow all of the hype to affect my judgment of this film. And I didn't really begin to take on the buzz until I seen the response from the critics. And the critics have given this universal praise. It's now starting to win international awards outside of Japan. In Japan, its homeland, it's won so much awards, so much universal praise. But now, recently, it's just won a couple of awards in Las Vegas. It's up for the foreign film category in, I think, the Film Choice Awards or something in Vegas. So it's doing really, really well. But I miss events cinema, and this film, whether I'm a kaiju fan or not, is a film event. It truly, truly is. So let's get on with it and let's talk about Godzilla Minus One. So the basic plot is post-war Japan is at its lowest point when a new crisis emerges in the form of a gigantic monster baptized in the horrific power of the atomic bomb. So that is your basic plot outline. So let's get into it. So the film basically, everybody has said, is a reimagination of Godzilla 1954. Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I think it is a mixture of nostalgia from 1954 and it's a mixture of originality. Because there's one big negative that a lot of people have on the Godzilla movies, and that is the fact that it was very hard to balance a human character plot with monster action. So as we've seen with the legendary Monsterverse, it's been a mixed bag of interesting plots. The first one, Godzilla 14, started off with a human story, but by the end kind of slipped away and was about the monster action. Godzilla 2014 was all about the monsters. It was a tribute to the original Showa era, so on, so on, so on. And the one film that has stood the test of time is Godzilla 1954, the one that started it all, because it had a very serious message about the atomic bombs and about, what happened with Hiroshima and the fallout of the nuclear bomb, in the character of Dr. Zarazawa and this love triangle and him going through, I would say, PTSD and, what he went through there and not wanting to allow his device to become a weapon of mass destruction, the oxygen destroyer, which could have been an even greater threat around the world. This film, even though it is a Godzilla movie, a monster movie, this is a character-driven film. And the lead character, which I'll look at because I'm horrendous at pronunciation, but the character of Koshi Shikishima, who is a former kamikaze pilot, he is the star of this film. It sounds weird to say that, not Godzilla, but this character is the star of this film. This film, he is the anchor throughout the plot of the movie. You follow him from start to end. You see him in the beginning is a cowardly, I guess, pilot who was frightened to go into the war as a pilot, and he lands on the island of Odo, claiming that there's been a malfunction to his plane. And the mechanics, who are just everyday mechanics on this island, some of them just don't believe him. One of them's trying to say, I can understand why you don't want to fight when we've lost the war anyway. And so then he is feeling tremendous, kind of anguish with this. And suddenly the island is attacked at night by this creature. And this is where the plot really takes a different tone. So the island and these mechanics and this one pilot are there, and they hear stories, but you don't actually see the locals on the island. But one of the characters claims that there is a legend of this creature known as Godzilla that hunts fish, comes on land, and does all of these things. And you don't really see any of the, like I say, the locals on the island. You just hear this legend, and suddenly you see dead fish floating around the waters, and the detail in some of these scenes is just fantastic. You then at night hear a roar, and then suddenly among the camp, the area where these these mechanics and pilot are, suddenly shows up this huge Tyrannosaurus Rex type version of Godzilla. Now, this, just the opening sequence of this film, for me, is probably one of the most terrifying sequences I have ever seen in a Godzilla film. Because, you know, like I said before, there are different different versions of Godzilla. There is the friendly version, there's the hero version, what I now class as the superhero version of Godzilla in the Monsterverse. Then you have the 1954 original Godzilla, who basically was just this creature formed from the atomic blasting and was, the metaphor for that, and came to Sean Tokyo and just wreaked havoc. The only other version of Godzilla that I was terrified from was the JMK version, because he looked pure like terror incarnate. Giant, tall, big fangs, big white eyes. Now, this version of Godzilla, which is the pre-evolved version of Godzilla, is sheer terrifying. He then goes forth, destroys the camp, kills all of the mechanics. But during that time, the lead character, who I mentioned, wait there, I'll look his name up again because I'm going to forget it. The Koshi, the main character, he gets asked while this thing's invading the camp to go board his plane, to use the gun on the plane to shoot Godzilla and to potentially kill him. But unfortunately, his fear overcomes him and he doesn't. And the rest of the islanders are killed. And the whole scene is just beautifully done. It's terrifying. Godzilla is at his most feared and most, beast-like that you've ever seen him. You then get Godzilla then just disappears. He disappears back into the ocean, and then Kochi, who survives, and the mechanic who was talking to him earlier on in the film, who said, I don't blame you for not wanting to fight because we've lost the war anyway. He then suddenly considers him a coward. And Koshi then returns to a destroyed Japan. It's based in 1940. It's based in 1946, just after the end of the war. And as you can imagine, Japan is just rubble. And he returns to the village where he grew up. His parents have now been killed. He has a female neighbour, who's lost her children in the war. And she knows he was a pilot and he's come back alive. And she also believes he's just a coward for, I guess, leaving and, desertion of his ranks within as a pilot. He suddenly meets a female character who becomes his partner, who is just in the streets with nowhere to go. Her home's been destroyed. She is, she's got a baby, which you believe is her baby, but is actually a child she has found and has adopted, who's clearly, during this terrible time, has lost their parents. And she is Nariko and Koshi get together. The great thing about this film, after just these first 10 minutes, it then skips. It skips a few years later, which is also another great plot point, is that Koshi and Naroko build a house together. He gets a job as on a boat as a bomb disposal person. It pays good money, and he sees it as the only way for him to earn money for him and Hiroko. But I also down believes by doing this and being near danger, he's kind of trying to prove himself. He's trying to prove he's not a coward. He's trying to redeem himself for not being able to do the things he could do in the war. So this story, as much as it's about Godzilla, it's about a man trying to redeem himself. It's about a man who goes through hell and back, who is trying to just build a life for himself. And it's a true war story at its finest. And during one of these particular scenes, you do see the atomic blast take place. You see a quick bit of footage of Operation Crossroads, which was the nuclear bomb that resulted in the mutation of Godzilla, which you don't really see a great detail of in 1954, and you don't see a great detail of it here in Godzilla Minus One, but you see the footage and you hear that agonizing, haunting roar of Godzilla take place. Once this takes place, suddenly you hear stories of naval ships being sunk in the Pacific, and you hear, the rumours that it belongs to a creature that's sinking these ships. Suddenly you see the look on Koshi's face of sheer dread and terror, because he knows what this is, because he's faced it before. And he's in total fear, and then the events transpire when Godzilla finally emerges and attacks Tokyo. And when Godzilla arrives and attacks Tokyo, the scenes are absolutely fantastic. The CGI, I've heard mixed bag from people about the CGI in this film. You have to remember, this is a Japanese film. It's in subtitles. They have a certain budget. It's not Hollywood budget. It's, Toho's budget. But for the amount of money that they spent on this film, it works very, very well. The effects are fantastic. The acting is fantastic. Each character is so believable. I cannot put into words. You feel every emotion. You feel every footstep of Godzilla. You feel the terror as he's walking down the streets of Tokyo and he's destroying everything in sight. It is pure terror and carnage at its finest. And it's during this first encounter when Godzilla arrives and destroys Tokyo. Again, well, there's not much destruction he can do because it's basically a bomb site. And he's just playing around and making a bigger mess that's already been done. And it's during this horrendous incident where tragedy strikes again. And when tragedy strikes again, that's when Koshi, who basically, when I think of Godzilla Minus One, the title, it's talking about him. He was a pilot in the war. He cowardly, left his post. He pretended he had this incident in a mechanical breakdown. He ends up on Odo Island. He sees the destruction take place with Godzilla. He has survivor's guilt. He feels terrible. And suddenly, once again, tragedy strikes and he loses even more. And at this point, he has nothing left. The only thing he has left is to redeem himself by somehow helping to end this terror that is attacked Tokyo and Japan. And so the great thing I love about the next few scenes is it's not the military. It's not the army because they're virtually wiped out. There's virtually nothing they could do. I love this because everything that takes place next, it's all about the people of Japan coming together. They come together in harmony to want to do whatever they can to save whatever they've got left, which isn't much. There isn't much left in Japan by this point, but they come together to eradicate this this threat. And throughout the plot and throughout this story, you meet a handful of other characters, like the crew of the boat that Hoshi's a part of. There's a number of amazing characters, and there's one particular character who's like a mini scientist who comes up with the idea and to how to counteract Godzilla and how to counteract and maybe put an end to him. And it's quite a creative scientific way. Obviously, it's not like 1954 where you had this scientist who came up with the oxygen destroyer, which was the device that destroyed Godzilla. They tried to use scientific real life issues like, you know, pressure, like water pressure and stuff like this. Like if you sink something to the bottom of the ocean and you make it rise up to the surface, it would probably implode on itself because of the pressure. And they use these real life scenarios to try and find a way to end Godzilla and the threat of Godzilla. Now, speaking of Godzilla, because I don't want to go into spoilers and, I don't want to mention, much more, I'll go into the details of Godzilla himself. Now, Godzilla himself, like I mentioned, seeing him on Odo Island was one thing. To now see him in his full form on in Tokyo, and to see how well he was crafted, how well he was made, how well he was put together, was just a sight for your eyes. It truly, truly was. The special effects team did an amazing job. His version of the atomic blast was so effective, and the unique way that he charges and releases that atomic breath is like nothing we've seen before. And for me personally, it's gonna take a lot to beat this version of Godzilla. I think he will now go down as the definitive Godzilla in my eyes for Toho. Ever since the 1954 one, for me that was always the go-to Godzilla. You have the Heisei era Godzilla is another favourite of mine, especially the Burning Godzilla, Godzilla 2000, GMK. But the one thing I loved about this, and we'll look back at the history of the Godzilla movies, is Godzilla is went through, like I say, different incarnations, but also technology has been limited. Or when you think of the time when we made the films back in the day, the 1950s, the 1980s, the early 2000s, you had to use whatever technology was available at the time. And each carnation has its good points and its bad points, and all have delivered what you would essentially expect from the Godzilla character. Because it's not really normally about how he's crafted, but how he is used and how he is shown on screen. And he always delivers in ways in different methods. How he was put together in this film was very similar for me of how Gareth Edwards created Godzilla in Godzilla was created in 2014. The one element I loved about Gareth Edwards' Godzilla 2014, he said out there, I want to make a Godzilla film as if Godzilla was a real creature, and how would he move? How would he act? how would he function in the real world if he was a real creature. So you put realistic animal traits into his version of Godzilla. When he fought the Mutos at the end of Godzilla 2014 and he fought the female Muto, he attacked her like he was a bear. The way he swings his head around, it's like, a soaring bird. When he attacked Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong, he attacked them on all fours like a crocodile. When I looked at this version of Godzilla in Minus One, I feel the director did such an amazing job to not only make him fearful, to make him terrifying, but he made him as realistic as possible. And it is thanks to the technology that we have today. And I'm forever grateful that he was able to bring this version of Godzilla to light. Speaking of the director, I'm going to attempt his name. The director of Godzilla Minus One is Takashi Yamazaki. And when this was first announced, Godzilla Minus One, I heard people say, we know he's a huge Godzilla fan. We know he has, the ability to be a great storyteller. But would he be a good fit for Godzilla? Well, he's he's thrown it out the park, because he has not only created an amazing Godzilla film with amazing special effects, a period piece, a war story. He's a character-driven story. A film that, for the first time in a long, long time, it's not just about Godzilla, but the characters, especially the main character. It's his story, it's his journey, and I think he's trumped it. I really, really do, and I don't think we'll ever have a Godzilla film like this again for a long time. It takes a very special director, storyteller that has a certain quality to make a film like this. That's why this is an event movie, because there's never been a Godzilla film of this magnitude for a very long time. Not since 1954. I have one negative about Godzilla Minus One, and that is, I'll get to that in a minute, because there's one other element I needed to mention that I nearly forgot, that I had absolutely adored about this movie. Not just its setting, not just its cast, not just Godzilla himself, but the movie score. This movie and its music was an absolute pleasure to listen to. It really draws you in. It really sets the tone for every scene, and it really just captivates every moment in this movie. The film score is just absolutely outstanding. Has all of the music from the original Showa eras. There's a handful. There's the original 1954 music. There's music scores mixed in and revamped to fit this film from other Showa era films. And I got goosebumps every time Godzilla hit that street, hit the ocean, and walked and fully showed himself in his most fearful form. And what brought it more to you is the music behind him. Music is so important in a movie, and this movie, the score is just magnificent. And what I will say to you, this is not just a movie for Godzilla fans. This is an event movie. This is a war movie. This is a character movie. This is a action sci-fi movie. So it's not just a kaiju movie. Non-kaiju fans have went to the cinema to see this all around the world because they've seen the hype, they've heard the hype, they've went in and they've walked out as a Godzilla fan. Or if they haven't walked out as a Godzilla fan, they've walked out of this film and went, what an amazing sci-fi action film. What an amazing war story. What an amazing character-driven movie. And due to that, the hype is real. The accolades it's getting is real, and it's well deserved. And because of that, I don't want to give any more details away except I loved it. It was everything I expected, but it had a lot more to it. In fact, I went into this nervous as hell thinking, because of the hype, it's been overhyped to hell. I'm not going to enjoy this. It's going to spoil it for us. But there were things I did not know about the film because I've avoided things online. And it was an absolute pleasure to go see. And so this gets, for me, a 10 out of 10. Would I say it's better than Godzilla 1954? I'm going to say no, which might surprise some people because Godzilla 1954 was a film that was a horror sci-fi film that had a very poignant message, that had great characters, a haunting movie score, and told a very serious story. This film has all of those, but for me, this was more about the character of the main star. It was his movie. Godzilla, for me, is the second co-star of this film, but he's a second co-star worth watching at every turn. There's not a lot of Godzilla in this, but there's enough that you want to keep watching, and there's enough in here that maybe that's what works best. Having less Godzilla and more story, better characters, or is it a balance of them both? And this, for me, balanced everything perfectly. So 10 out of 10 for me. And I'll now tell you me negative. Me negative is because this film has delivered so much and has created basically new eyes on it in terms of the kaiju genre, it's opened the door for so much more. And I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. Some people will say it's a positive, but then why I say it's a negative is because whatever is to come next is going to have to try and trump what's come before it, which is of course this Godzilla Minus One. Now, back after Shin Godzilla came out in 2016, there was talk of a sequel. The sequel was then cancelled, and then Toho announced that they were doing The World of Godzilla, which was their own version of a multiverse, similar to Marvel and DC. But here's a fun fact for you. Godzilla and the Kaiju did it way before Marvel. Way back when in the 1950s, you had Godzilla 1954, you had a Mothra solo film, you had a Rodan solo film, and eventually they brought them together into the same film universe, aka the Showa era of films. So there's never really been a continuous franchise within the world of the kaiju in a very long time, because the majority of the films always start with 1954 as the start point, and then each film after that, especially in the Millennium era, were just standalone films. It's going to be interesting to see if this film, Godzilla Minus One, is going to be the starting point of a brand new film franchise. And if it is, I'm looking forward to it. But like I say, this is my only negative. Whatever comes next is going to have to deliver. and if it doesn't, it's still going to be fun. It's still more kaiju movies, but I think this has set a bar very, very high, maybe too high. But either way, I am looking forward to what's coming next. 10 out of 10 for Godzilla Minus One. It was an event film that deserves to be an event film, and as a kaiju fan, I left happy. As a Godzilla fan, I was blown away and just mesmerized by it all. But let me know what you thought of Godzilla Minus One if you've seen it. I'm one of the lucky ones here in the UK that this film came out or comes out on the 15th of December here in the UK. I got to see it on the 11th as part of an early screening, and ever since it's trumped the box office in America, it was only getting a 3-day release here in the UK. They've now extended it to the 22nd of December. There are 5 screenings a day instead of just 2 a day. So, of course, it's doing well everywhere else, and hopefully due to the extension here in the UK, other than just being a 3-day release, it's going to be just as well here. So anyway, Kaiju fans, anyway, Godzilla fans, this has been my Minus One review. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm still basically on the come down from everything I've seen, and I can't wait to watch this again. So keep the kaiju carnage alive.